What if I told you a 4-year-old boy disappeared in the middle of nowhere? And the theories about what happened to him are more disturbing than the disappearance itself. I'm talking about a case that has haunted investigators, torn apart a community, and left the world asking one question: what really happened to Gus Lamont? September 2025. A remote sheep station in South Australia. Think of it like a massive ranch in the middle of the desert, hours from the nearest town, no neighbors for miles. A place so isolated that if you scream, nobody hears you. 4-year-old Gus Lamont was playing outside one moment, and the next, he was gone. Vanished. No trace. No clues. Just gone. Search teams combed thousands of acres. Helicopters circled overhead. Tracking dogs picked up nothing. And as days turned into weeks, people started asking the hard questions. Did he wander off and get lost? Was he taken by an animal? Abducted by a stranger? Or is there something darker at play? Something nobody wants to say out loud? Today, we're diving deep into the disappearance of Gus Lamont. We're going to walk through every theory, from the logical to the downright disturbing. And I'm warning you now, this one's going to mess with your head. So stick around. Let's figure this out together. And if you're into unsolved mysteries like this, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. All right. Let me introduce you to Gus. Gus Lamont was 4 years old, bright, curious, full of energy like any kid his age. He loved playing outside, exploring, getting into things the way little kids do. By all accounts, he was a happy child living with his family on a sheep station near Yunta, South Australia. Now, if you're not familiar with the Australian Outback, let me paint you a picture. Imagine the most remote place you can think of, then multiply that by 10. We're talking about a sheep station, which is basically a massive ranch covering thousands of acres of dry, dusty land. The nearest town, Yunta, has a population of around 50 people. 50. The nearest city? Hours away by car. There's no cell service out there, no street lights, no traffic, just endless stretches of red dirt, scrub brush, and sky. It's the kind of place where you can see for miles in every direction, and yet somehow, a child can disappear without a trace. Gus's family had been living on the station for years. They were used to the isolation, the harsh conditions, the extreme heat. Life out there isn't easy, but it's what they knew. And for Gus, it was home. On the day he disappeared, it was just another day. The sun was blazing. Temperatures were pushing into the high 90s. Gus was playing outside near the house like he'd done 100 times before. His family was nearby, going about their daily routines. Everything seemed normal. Until it wasn't. Before we go any further, where are you watching from? I love seeing where this story reaches. Drop your location in the comments below. Now here's the thing about living in a place that remote. There's a certain level of freedom kids have. They can run around, explore, play outside without constant supervision. It's not like living in a city where you have to watch your kid every second. Out there, the dangers are different. Heat, wildlife, terrain. But abduction? That's not something you think about when you're in the middle of nowhere. But on September 17th, 2025, that sense of safety shattered. Gus's family realized he wasn't where he was supposed to be. They called his name, checked the usual spots, the shed, the yard, the nearby paddocks. Nothing. Panic set in fast. They searched the immediate area, calling out for him, hoping he'd just wandered a little too far and would come running back. But minutes turned into an hour. And that's when they knew. Something was very, very wrong. They called for help. And that's where our story really begins. September 17th, 2025, mid-afternoon. Gus was last seen playing outside near the main house on the sheep station. His family members were nearby, some working, some inside. It was a typical day, hot, quiet, routine. Around 3:30 p.m., someone noticed Gus wasn't around. At first, it wasn't alarming. Kids wander off. They get distracted. But when they called his name and got no response, concern started to creep in. By 4:00 p.m., they were actively searching. Family members fanned out across the property. checking every building, every vehicle, every possible hiding spot. Gus was a little kid. He couldn't have gone far, right? But there was no sign of him. By 4:30 p.m., they called the police. Now, here's where the isolation becomes a factor. The nearest police station was over an hour away. Emergency services in remote areas like this are stretched thin. It's not like calling 911 in a city where help arrives in minutes. Out there, you're on your own for a while. Local police arrived around 6:00 p.m. By then, the sun was starting to dip lower in the sky. Temperatures were still brutal, but they'd start dropping fast once night fell. And in the Outback, nighttime is a whole different beast. It gets cold, dark, dangerous. The initial search focused on the immediate area around the house. Officers, family members, and neighbors who'd rushed over to help combed through every inch of the property. They checked water tanks, sheds, vehicles, livestock pens, anywhere a small child might have crawled into or gotten stuck. Nothing. No clothing, no footprints, no signs of a struggle. It was like Gus had simply evaporated. By nightfall, search and rescue teams were mobilized. Volunteers from surrounding areas started arriving. They brought flashlights, radios, ATVs, anything that could help cover more ground. But searching at night in the Outback is nearly impossible. The terrain is rough, visibility is zero, and the risks are high. They had to wait until morning. Imagine being Gus's parents that night. Your child is out there somewhere, lost, scared, alone. The temperature is dropping, wild animals are active, and there's nothing you can do but wait for the sun to come up. The next morning, the search intensified. Helicopters were brought in. Drones equipped with thermal imaging cameras scanned the area from above. Tracking dogs were deployed, trained to pick up scents over long distances. But here's the thing. The dogs couldn't find a trail. They picked up Gus's scent near the house, but it just stopped, like he'd vanished into thin air. Days passed. The search radius expanded. Hundreds of volunteers joined the effort. They searched on foot, on horseback, in vehicles. They covered thousands of acres. They checked every gully, every dry creek bed, every cluster of trees. Still nothing. No clothing, no belongings, no body. And just like that, Gus Lamont was gone. The search for Gus Lamont became one of the largest operations in South Australia's history. And let me tell you, searching the Outback is no joke. We're talking about terrain that's hostile, unforgiving, and massive. Thousands of acres of flat, featureless land where everything looks the same. No landmarks, no roads, just endless stretches of dirt and scrub. The heat alone is a killer. During the day, temperatures soar into the triple digits. The sun beats down relentlessly. There's no shade, no water. If Gus had wandered off on foot, he would have been facing extreme dehydration within hours. But the search teams didn't give up. Helicopters flew grid patterns scanning the ground below. Pilots and spotters looked for any sign, a flash of color, movement, anything that might indicate a small child. Drones equipped with thermal cameras searched for heat signatures, hoping to detect Gus if he was hiding or unconscious somewhere. Tracking dogs were brought in from across the state. These are highly trained animals, capable of following scents over long distances and rough terrain. But here's the problem. The dogs hit a dead end. They picked up Gus's scent near the house, followed it for a short distance, and then nothing. The trail just stopped. That's not normal. When a child wanders off, there's usually a trail, footprints, disturbed vegetation, something. But in Gus's case, it was like he'd been plucked off the ground. Volunteers poured in from surrounding communities, farmers, ranchers, locals who knew the land. They all joined the search. They walked shoulder to shoulder in lines, covering every inch of ground. They checked abandoned buildings, old wells, livestock troughs, anywhere a child might have ended up. Days turned into a week, then 2 weeks. The search continued, but hope was fading. Statistically, the chances of finding a missing child alive dropped dramatically after the first 48 hours. In the Outback, with extreme temperatures and limited water, those odds are even worse. But Gus's family refused to give up. They held vigils. They made public appeals. They begged anyone with information to come forward. The media picked up the story. News outlets across Australia and eventually around the world started covering the case. Gus's face was everywhere. Social media exploded with theories, tips, and speculation. And that's when people started asking the hard questions. How does a 4-year-old just disappear? In broad daylight? From a property where people were nearby? The official search eventually scaled back. Resources are finite, and after weeks of finding nothing, authorities had to make tough decisions. But the case remained open. Investigators continued following leads, interviewing witnesses, analyzing evidence. And the theories? They started piling up. All right, here's where things get complicated and disturbing. Because when a child disappears without a trace, people start filling in the blanks. And some of those theories? They'll keep you up at night. Let's break them down, one by one. Theory 1. Let's start with the most obvious theory. The one investigators probably considered first. Gus wandered off. He got disoriented. He couldn't find his way back. And in the harsh conditions of the Outback, he succumbed to the elements. On the surface, this makes sense. 4-year-olds are curious. They don't understand danger the way adults do. Gus could have seen something interesting, a lizard, a bird, a shiny rock, and followed it. Before he knew it, he was too far from the house to hear anyone calling his name. The Outback is disorienting even for adults. There are no landmarks. Everything looks the same. A child could walk in circles for hours and never realize it. And then there's the heat. Temperatures that day were in the high 90s. For a small child, dehydration sets in fast. Within a few hours, Gus would have been in serious trouble. Confusion, dizziness, collapse. It happens quickly. If he wandered far enough, he could have ended up in a gully, behind a cluster of rocks, or in a dry creek bed, somewhere the search teams might have missed. But here's the problem with this theory. No body, no clothing, no belongings, nothing. Search teams covered thousands of acres. They used helicopters, drones, thermal imaging, tracking dogs. They searched for weeks, and they found absolutely nothing. If Gus had wandered off and collapsed somewhere, there should have been something. A shoe, a piece of clothing, bones eventually. But there's nothing. And then there's the tracking dogs. These animals are trained to follow scents over long distances. They should have been able to track Gus's path, even if he'd walked for miles. But the dogs lost the scent almost immediately, like Gus just stopped existing. So if he wandered off, where is he? How does a child disappear so completely that not a single trace is left behind? What do you think? Could a 4-year-old really disappear without leaving a single clue? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Some people believe Gus could have fallen into a hidden mine shaft or sinkhole, something that swallowed him up and concealed his body. The Outback is full of old mining sites, some unmarked and overgrown. It's possible. But search teams specifically looked for those hazards. They checked known mine shafts, used ground-penetrating radar, explored caves, and still, nothing. So while this theory is logical, it doesn't explain everything. And that's what makes this case so haunting. The Australian Outback is home to dingoes, wild dogs that are native to the region. And yes, they have been known to attack humans, especially small children. If you're familiar with Australian true crime, you've probably heard of the Azaria Chamberlain case. In 1980, a 9-week-old baby disappeared from a campsite near Uluru. Her mother claimed a dingo took her. For years, people didn't believe her. She was convicted of murder, but decades later, evidence proved she was telling the truth. A dingo had taken baby Azaria. So the question is, could the same thing have happened to Gus? Dingoes are present in the area around Yunta. So are feral dogs, domestic dogs that have gone wild and formed packs. Both are opportunistic predators. A small child, alone and vulnerable, could be seen as prey. If a dingo or a pack of wild dogs attacked Gus, they could have dragged him away quickly. Animals are fast, they're efficient, and they don't leave much behind. But here's the thing. There was no blood. No torn clothing, no animal tracks, no signs of a struggle. When an animal attacks, there's evidence. Blood spatter, drag marks, fur or paw prints, something. The search teams included experts in wildlife tracking. They looked for signs of animal activity, and they found nothing that suggested an attack. Plus, dingoes and wild dogs are generally wary of humans. They avoid areas with a lot of human activity. The sheep station had people around, workers, family members. It's unlikely a dingo would have approached so close to the house in broad daylight. And then there's the tracking dogs again. If Gus had been dragged away by an animal, the dogs should have picked up on that. They should have followed the scent trail. But they didn't. So if an animal took him, why is there zero evidence? Some people argue that animals are smart. They cover their tracks. They take their prey to hidden dens or remote areas. Maybe Gus's body is out there somewhere, in a place so remote that it'll never be found. It's possible, but it doesn't sit right with a lot of people. Because even in cases where animals are involved, there's usually something left behind. A shoe, a piece of fabric, bones. In Gus's case, nothing. So while this theory can't be completely ruled out, it raises more questions than it answers. Theory 3. What if Gus didn't wander off? What if he was taken? I know what you're thinking. The sheep station is in the middle of nowhere. Who would be out there? How would a stranger even know Gus was there? But here's the thing. Remote doesn't mean impossible. There are roads that pass through the area. Dirt roads mostly, used by workers, delivery drivers, travelers passing through. Someone could have been driving by, seen an opportunity, and acted on it. Abductions happen fast. A child playing outside, unsupervised for just a few minutes. That's all it takes. A vehicle pulls up, someone grabs the kid, and they're gone before anyone notices. And in a place as isolated as the Outback, there are no witnesses, no security cameras, no neighbors looking out their windows. If someone wanted to take a child, this would be the perfect place to do it. But let's think about the logistics. First, timing. Gus disappeared in the middle of the afternoon. His family was nearby. For someone to abduct him, they would have had to act incredibly quickly and quietly. No screaming, no struggle, just gone. Second, access. The sheep station isn't right off a main road. You'd have to know it was there. You'd have to have a reason to be in the area. So was this a random crime of opportunity? Or was someone watching? Waiting? That's the part that gives people chills. What if someone had been scoping out the property? What if they knew the family's routines? What if Gus was targeted? If this theory gives you chills, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. Now here's the problem with the abduction theory. No witnesses, no vehicles reported in the area, no ransom demands, no sightings of Gus anywhere. When a child is abducted, there's usually some kind of trail. Someone sees something, a vehicle is spotted, there's a ransom call, something. But in Gus's case? Silence. Investigators interviewed everyone in the area. They checked traffic cameras on nearby highways. They followed up on every tip that came in, and they found nothing that suggested an abduction. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, right? Just because they didn't find proof doesn't mean it didn't happen. There are cases where children are abducted and never found, where the perpetrator is careful, methodical, and leaves no trace. It's rare, but it happens. And in a place as remote as the Outback, it's entirely possible that someone could have taken Gus and disappeared without a trace. So who would take a child from the middle of nowhere? And why? That's the question that haunts investigators. And it's the question that keeps this theory alive. Because if Gus was abducted, he could still be out there, somewhere. Theory 4. In cases like this, investigators always look close to home first. It's not because they're heartless or cynical, it's because statistically when a child goes missing, family members are often involved. I'm not accusing anyone, I want to make that clear. But this is a theory that's been discussed, debated, and dissected online. So let's talk about it. What if something happened to Gus, an accident maybe, and someone panicked? What if the disappearance wasn't a disappearance at all, but a cover-up? It sounds horrible. I know. But it happens more often than you'd think. A child falls, hits their head, drowns in a water tank, gets injured in a way that looks bad, and instead of calling for help, someone panics. They hide the body. They stage a disappearance. They lie. In Gus's case, the family was the last to see him. They were the ones who reported him missing. They were the ones who controlled the narrative in those first critical hours. And in the early days of the investigation, there were whispers, inconsistencies in statements, questions about timelines, media scrutiny. The internet, as it does, ran wild with speculation. People analyzed interviews, looking for signs of deception. They questioned why certain details didn't add up. They pointed fingers. But here's the thing. There's no evidence of foul play. None. Investigators interviewed the family extensively. They conducted searches of the property. They looked for signs of a cover-up, disturbed soil, hidden items, anything suspicious. They found nothing. The family cooperated fully with the investigation. They allowed searches. They took polygraph tests, if applicable. They made public appeals, begging for information. And they've been living with this nightmare ever since. What time is it where you are? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious how late you're staying up for this one. So if the family knows something, why would they put themselves through this? Why would they endure the media scrutiny, the public suspicion, the endless questions? It doesn't make sense. But the theory persists. Because in the absence of answers, people look for someone to blame. And the family is the easiest target. Some people believe the family is hiding something, that there's a secret they're not telling, that Gus's disappearance wasn't random, but the result of something that happened on that property. Others believe the family is innocent, that they're victims of a tragedy they had no control over, that they're being unfairly vilified by armchair detectives who don't know the full story. The truth? We don't know. What we do know is that investigators haven't charged anyone. They haven't named any suspects. And the case remains open. So while this theory can't be completely dismissed, it's important to remember that suspicion isn't proof, and without evidence, it's just speculation. But it's a theory that refuses to die, and it's one of the reasons this case is so divisive. Theory 5. What if Gus didn't wander off, wasn't taken by an animal, wasn't abducted, and the family had nothing to do with it? What if something else happened? Something we can't explain? Let me start with the logical version of this theory. The Outback is riddled with old mining sites. Mine shafts, tunnels, caves, some marked, some not. Over the years, the land has been dug up, hollowed out, and abandoned, and a lot of those sites are hidden, overgrown, forgotten. It's entirely possible that Gus stumbled onto one of these sites. Maybe he was playing, saw a hole in the ground, got curious, and fell in. And once he was down there, there was no way out. Mine shafts can be deep, hundreds of feet. If Gus fell into one, his body could be at the bottom, completely out of reach. And unless you know exactly where to look, you'd never find it. Search teams did check known mine shafts in the area. They used ground-penetrating radar. They explored caves, but the Outback is massive. There could be sites they missed, sites that aren't on any map, so it's possible. But then there's the other version of this theory, the one that ventures into the unexplained. Online, people have suggested everything from human trafficking rings operating in remote areas, to underground bunkers, to, well, let's just say the internet has theories. Some people believe Gus was taken by someone involved in illegal activity, that the Outback is used as a route for smuggling or trafficking, and Gus was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Others believe there's something more sinister at play, something that doesn't have a rational explanation. I'm not going to dive too deep into the fringe theories here, but I will say this. When a case has no answers, people start looking for explanations outside the norm. And in Gus's case, the lack of evidence has fueled a lot of speculation. The reality is, we don't know what happened. And that's what makes this case so frustrating. Search teams covered thousands of acres, they used every tool available, they followed every lead, and they found nothing. So what are we missing? Is there a hidden mine shaft out there with Gus's body at the bottom? Is there a piece of evidence that was overlooked? Is there someone out there who knows what happened but hasn't come forward? Or is this one of those cases that will never be solved? One of those mysteries that haunts us because we'll never have closure? I don't have the answers, nobody does. But what I do know is that Gus Lamont deserves to be found. His family deserves answers. And the world deserves to know the truth. So we keep asking questions. We keep looking for clues. And we keep his story alive. Because maybe, just maybe, someone out there knows something. As of today, Gus Lamont is still missing. The investigation is still open. And his family is still searching for answers. In the months since his disappearance, there have been occasional developments. Tips come in from time to time. Someone thinks they saw a child matching Gus's description, or they remember seeing a suspicious vehicle in the area around the time he vanished. Investigators follow up on every lead. They re-interview witnesses, they re-examine evidence. But so far, nothing has led to a breakthrough. The case has attracted attention from online sleuths, people who dedicate their time to analyzing unsolved cases, combing through details and proposing theories. Some of these amateur investigators have raised interesting points. Others have spread misinformation and conspiracy theories. It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, the attention keeps the case in the public eye. On the other hand, it can be overwhelming for the family and frustrating for investigators who are trying to separate fact from fiction. Gus's family has remained active in the search. They've organized search parties, distributed flyers, and made public appeals. They've appeared on news programs, given interviews, and used social media to keep Gus's story alive. They refuse to give up hope. And honestly, I can't imagine what they're going through. The not knowing, the endless questions, the guilt, the fear, the heartbreak. Every parent's worst nightmare. The local community has rallied around the family. Vigils have been held. Fundraisers have been organized to support ongoing search efforts. People who've never met the Lamonts have donated time, money, and resources to help find Gus. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, humanity can show up. But the reality is, as time goes on, the chances of finding Gus alive diminish. It's been months now, and while miracles do happen, they're rare. What the family wants, what everyone wants, is closure. Even if the outcome isn't what they hope for, knowing what happened would be better than this endless uncertainty. If you want to stay updated on cases like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. I cover new developments as they happen, and I'll keep you posted if there's any news about Gus. There have been calls for renewed search efforts. Some people believe that with new technology, better drones, more advanced ground-penetrating radar, there's a chance of finding something that was missed the first time. Others believe the key to solving this case lies in re-examining the evidence, going back over witness statements, looking for inconsistencies or details that were overlooked. And then there are those who believe the answer is out there, in the hands of someone who hasn't come forward yet, someone who saw something, someone who knows something. If that's you, if you have any information about Gus Lamont's disappearance, please, reach out to authorities. Even the smallest detail could be the piece of the puzzle that brings him home. Because right now Gus's family is living in limbo, and they deserve answers. It's not just the mystery, it's not just the lack of answers. It's the fact that a 4-year-old boy, a child who should have been safe, who should have been playing and laughing and living his life, just vanished. And nobody knows why. I think about Gus's parents. I think about what it must be like to wake up every day not knowing where your child is. To go to bed every night wondering if he's out there somewhere, scared and alone. Or worse, knowing he might not be out there at all. I think about the search teams who spent weeks combing through the Outback hoping to find him. The volunteers who gave their time and energy, driven by the belief that every child deserves to be found. I think about the community that came together, refusing to let Gus be forgotten. And I think about the theories. all of them, because each one represents a different kind of nightmare. If Gus wandered off and succumbed to the elements, it's a tragedy, a reminder of how unforgiving nature can be. If he was taken by an animal, it's horrifying, a reminder that we share this world with creatures that don't see us the way we see ourselves. If he was abducted, it's terrifying, a reminder that evil exists, even in the most remote places. If the family was involved, it's heartbreaking, a reminder that sometimes the people we trust the most are capable of unthinkable things. And if something else happened, something we can't explain, it's unsettling, a reminder that there are still mysteries in this world we don't understand. But here's the thing. No matter which theory you believe, the outcome is the same. Gus is gone, and his family is left with questions that may never be answered. This case has broader implications, too. It sparked conversations about child safety in remote areas, about the challenges of search and rescue operations in harsh terrain, about the ethics of media coverage and online speculation. It's forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about how quickly a life can change, how fragile safety really is, how much we take for granted. And it's reminded us that behind every true crime story, there are real people, real families, real pain. Gus Lamont isn't just a case file. He's a little boy who loved playing outside, who had a family that loved him, who had a future that was stolen from him. And he deserves to be remembered. What's the weather like where you are today? I love hearing from you all. Drop a comment below. We may never know what happened to Gus. This might be one of those cases that remains unsolved forever. But that doesn't mean we stop asking questions. It doesn't mean we stop looking for answers. Because Gus's story matters. His life matters. And the truth, whatever it is, matters. If you made it this far, thank you. Seriously. Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more unsolved mysteries like this, check out the playlist I've linked on screen. I'll see you in the next one. And to Gus's family, if you're watching this, I hope you get the answers you're looking for. I hope you find peace. And I hope, somehow, Gus comes home.